That's it. So today I'm going to focus on, actually, before I even start that, who here has seen previous talks about Denali, the ones we did at TechEd Europe or PASS? Okay, good. So there's actually lots of new stuff. Some of this will be review for you guys. And who has tried Denali? Okay, a couple people as well. So integration services in Denali has two main kind of pillars of our release. We focused on enhanced usability, so improving the dev experience. And there's two main things here. One is to make the product easier to use. Right? So for new users that can pick it up a lot faster. SSIS has some rough points, there's some steep learning curves. So the idea here was to build a ramp, make it easier for them to learn. The improvement was called the ramp improvement. And so it's a bunch of different UI features to kind of make it easier for new users, as well as some key productivity things for existing users, like undo, for example. We now have undo in the designer. As well as changes to make team development easier and stuff like that too. The other major pillar is about making deployment, configuration, and management of your packages easier. So make it easier for the ETL developer to know what they want to target, and also make it easier for the DBA persona that we talk about that actually does the running of packages and maintenance and management and everything like that. So those are our two main pillars, and all of the work that we've done so far has gone towards those. So in the initial CTP that some of you tried out, we introduced these features, kind of get the concepts out there, we got some amazing feedback on this stuff. Since then, we've been working solely on usability. We've fixed a lot of issues that have been there since 2005, and so hopefully you'll be very happy with what I'm going to show today. So after I do my initial presentation about all the designer experience stuff, I'm going to focus on a couple of main scenarios. I'm going to talk about converting packages from today's format to Denali. Should be a pretty painless process. I'm going to talk about using the new SSIS-based server, which is going to be the focal point for deployment and troubleshooting and logging and stuff like that. And I'll talk about actual troubleshooting on the server, which is the big, in my opinion, the big advantage to this new server model. Okay? First, I'm going to go into the actual developer experience. What's the first thing you notice about SSIS? Curvy lines, right. We have rounded corners. We had an intern come in and sand down the corners of all of our tasks. It took about 3 months. But now the tasks are more aerodynamic, so packages run faster. The other thing that might not be so obvious, apparently, is that we're running in Visual Studio 2010. Isn't that great? I have a funny story for that too, but I'll see if I have time after to talk about that. I'll just go down my list here. So first up, we have different design surface changes. So I talked about the rounded corners. We have a new look. We have new icons here and stuff like that. We actually had to replace our old design surface, which was based on an old technology that Visual Studio has since deprecated. Now we have a WPF-based design surface. We've improved annotations. Annotations are a lot easier to use. So, whoops, here, let me put this in a better spot. Let me create a new annotation here. My annotations are too big. They're supposed to be easier if I keep typing here and I hit enter. Hey, I auto-grow. And the text also auto-wraps. You're no longer crazily resizing annotations. A lot easier. I can show off my escape and my Control-Z to actually, or Control-Z if you're a fellow Canadian out there, to do undo. We have undo and redo support as well. We have this new Getting Started window. This is part of our ramp improvement. This has links. It's a live feed, basically, links to SSIS videos, tutorials, links to samples and stuff like that. We have two new buttons up here. We have I don't know if you can see that. We have a toolbox button and a variables window button. And if I click that button, open up the new SSIS toolbox. We no longer use the built-in toolbox in Visual Studio. There's some performance issues. It could take a long time to open. That's because it basically iterates every single .NET component you have on your machine every time you open the toolbox. Now we have our own custom toolbox. This is a lot snappier. You can organize things, move things around, move to favorites, to other tasks. When you install a third-party component or a custom component, you drop it in the directory, and it automatically shows up in the toolbox. You don't have to go and fiddle and make sure you add them. You also notice that at the bottom here, we have descriptions of every one of our tasks, and a nice little help button to bring up books online, and also a link you can click, find samples. It's going to bring you to CodePlex and show you different samples and examples of how to actually use the task. Okay? Another one of our ramp features for new users. And if I click this button, I bring up our new variables window. This has had some improvements as well. First thing I want to point out is, well, besides, I forgot to mention here too, we have lots of new icons, so everything's been kind of reskinned, given a bit more of a modern look. Within, one of the neat features here is decorations on our expressions. I probably can't see it, but if I zoom in, notice here I have this decoration on my connection manager icon. That means that I've actually applied a configuration to, I've applied an expression on this connection manager. So I know that there is an expression somewhere on one of those properties, right? So I can look at the expression window, or sorry, the properties window, and actually take a look where that expression is. So currently that is on connection managers. In the next release, it will also be on tasks as well. And it's on variables here. You see, if we zoom down here, we have variables. So variables that evaluate as expressions also have these icons on them. So you easily know where your expressions are. If you've ever worked on like different add-ons for SSIS, all that stuff is available through the API as well, which makes it a lot easier to interact with if you're using tools like Bids Helper and stuff like that. What else do we have? So if, connection manager connectivity, yeah? So you notice there's another type of icon down here on this connection manager, right? This little X here. That means that connection manager is offline. How many times have you opened up a package that didn't have connectivity and it sort of hangs your UI and you have to wait for it to time out? That doesn't happen anymore. Now, if a connection manager, so when the package first opens, it'll actually try to validate all the connection managers. If one doesn't, if it fails to connect, it'll validate on separate threads too. If it fails to connect, it marks it as offline. So right click here and there's a work offline thing. So it marks that one offline, so the next time it tries to validate, it just will return immediately. So you don't get that hanging anymore. I can also take a connection manager offline, so say work offline, or put it back online by doing test connectivity. So if I've corrected a value or if I've changed its settings, I can test and bring it back online. What else do I have? OK. So if I were to select a task and click new variable or add variable, where would that variable go? What scope would it go into? To the task. No, now it goes to the package level, because very rarely do you actually want a variable at a lower scope. So by default, it puts the variable at the package level. There's also this handy move variable button that lets me change a variable scope. Oh, good. I always like applause. Feel free to applause. I'm willing to accept it. So let's open this, get some more room. So we have a new task called the expression task. It's not that big a deal. We actually had it. The reason why we added it was because in 2008 we actually had it all implemented. It was ready to go. We just hadn't tested the UI, so we had to cut it at the last moment. So we actually put it in. It has some interesting uses. So it basically lets you evaluate an expression at runtime. Okay? And so one of the things about expressions is that, say you put this expression on a variable. Okay? So my expression here is int variable equals int variable plus 1. If I have that on my variable normally, every time it gets evaluated, my package is updated, right? Because the value is always changing. Well, basically, so if you're in source control, it'll check out your package, stuff like that. With the expression task, it means this will only be evaluated at runtime. Right? So whatever default value you give it, that will always stay that way in the package. So you can just update things at runtime. So it's pretty useful. That's the expression task. I just talked about variable scope changes, the move variable button. Copy and paste, we actually made a bunch of improvements to copy and paste. So we're a lot smarter about copying dependencies. So I take a data flow and copy it to a brand new package. It's going to copy all the connection managers, all the related variables, basically everything it needs. I can copy connection managers between packages, tasks between packages, variables in the same window. I can copy and paste variables between packages. Lots of improvements there. There's also this new zoom control. Ooh, look at this. I can zoom in and out. And an auto size, so it's just going to basically justify it to your entire area. And now we've plugged into Visual Studio auto save and recovery. Not that SSIS or BIDS ever crashes, but if it were, say you lose power or something like that, the project would auto-save, and when you open it back up, it will give you the option to recover. Next, we have scripts. So we've upgraded our VSTA engine. It now uses 3.0. This is a much, it's a much less drastic switch from 2005 to 2008. We went from VSA to VSTA. The migration to 3.0 should be seamless. A good thing is VSTA 3.0 is based on the Visual Studio 2010 shell. Now this is real bleeding edge, because I don't know if you know this, but Visual Studio uses VSTA as well for the macro editor. If you go and create a new macro in Visual Studio, it brings up, in Visual Studio 2010, it brings up a 2008 shell. So I actually have two different shells operating. So we're the only ones now using this new, brand new Visual Studio 2010 shell for VSTA 3.0. One of the cool things is this adds .NET 4 support. So your custom scripts can now target .NET 4 assemblies or any other version of .NET. And of course, we still support Visual C# and Visual Basic. We've also changed the way we run scripts. Scripts will actually perform better. Before we'd use VSTA for the design time experience and also the runtime experience. Now we just use it for design time, and we embed the actual assemblies directly into the SSIS packages. So that has opened up a whole bunch of new opportunities for us. Data flow. We've made some specific data flow improvements as well. So if we look at the toolbox, you'll see we have new icons for that. We also have some interesting components here. I don't know if you can see. So Facebook store. So there's a question before, did we change the slowly changing dimension wizard? We had a choice. Do we fix the slowly changing dimension wizard, or do we add Facebook connectors? Personally, I think we made the right choice. That is a joke before you start filling out your evaluations. If you're interested about why I have these transforms, I'll be demoing at the BI Power Hour next. If you've never been to a Power Hour before, highly recommend it. Showcase session at TechEd. And I'll be showing how I make use of those custom connectors to manage my social life. OK, so that was a quick aside. So here within the data flow, we've made a lot of improvements to make metadata mapping easier and smarter. Okay? So here I have a package reading from a raw file. It has some customer information. I have a copy column transform. I'm making some copies of some columns. It goes to a sort and then a destination. If I delete this connector here, this path, I get put into an error state. But notice the error is floating above the component. Okay? It means that there's a mapping error, not a problem with the component itself. I can actually open up a component and still edit it if I want. I can make changes even though it's in an error state. Nice. Now I have so I have an alternative source here. And the alternative source has things slightly different. Same data, but I've renamed some of the columns. Instead of first name, I've given name, and last name goes to family name. Now what happens when you hook up a different source to a data flow? All right, you get your lineage IDs don't match, and you have to go in and update all the columns, right? We've pretty much done away with lineage IDs. So now I hook it up, and it auto-maps the ones it can, right? But it still says, hey, there's still some columns we don't know about, right? So I can double-click that, and this brings up our new mapper. So if I show, it doesn't really show up, but we've actually highlighted the entire execution tree to mean that when I fix this, this is going to fix the mappings for this entire execution tree. This is our new column mapper. It's pretty smart. I can say auto-map by name. It will match by name and data type. Just auto-map them in. I can say family name goes to last name. Given name goes to first name. Whoops. Given name goes to first name. I can filter. Quickly filters things out. I can also copy the mappings to Excel. So export them to Excel format, and I can paste them in Excel. And I can also import mappings from Excel. So I could do all my mappings in Excel and just import them in. So this mapping UI was actually added for the Parallel Data Warehouse destination. When using Parallel Data Warehouse, you actually have a lot of columns, like hundreds of columns at a time, and doing regular mapping was a bit painful. So this is part of the, we made this improvement specifically for that, and we've included it as just our regular mapping UI because it was pretty useful. Smarter mapping, yeah, improve column mapper. So let me back up. I'll undo these things. Another thing is data flow grouping. Okay, so if I select my annotations here, I can do a group. Okay, and this kind of looks like a sequence container, but it doesn't affect your execution like a sequence container would. There was a grouping in the control flow. Now it's in the data flow as well. What this lets me do is select a group of tasks or annotations and then hide them. Okay? So I can, if I have a very large data flow, I can isolate certain parts of it, hide it, display it, make it easier to read. If I want really long annotations somewhere, like I want to paste my SQL query, I can do that and have a quick, be able to hide it. We've simplified our data viewers. I can just right-click on a path, do Enable Data Viewer, and now my data viewers are on. I don't have to worry about configuring and picking the types. So we have a whole bunch of types of data viewers. Who here has actually used one besides Grid? Except for Matthew. Right. So they're really useful in demos. Like, they look great in demos, but there's no real practical use for them. So we decided just to go straight Grid. They become very easy to set up. I can enable and disable the same way. And they remember your settings if you've customized your columns. They remember things and stuff like that. These new source and destination assistants. So in 2008, we added a new project type called the Integration Services Connection Wizard project type. Has anybody used that project type? One person, OK. It was very useful in theory. The idea behind it was that you go through this wizard, and instead of asking you what type of connection technology would you like to use, it asks you what kind of data source would you like to connect to. Right? It's the more natural progression of questions. Problem with the wizard, with the new project type, is it does it once. So we've actually added a source and destination assistant here. Drag it on, and when I drag it on, it's going to ask me what type of data source I want to connect to. See here, we have ones that we know about. We have this XML file that has the mappings. We know that for SQL Server, you want to use OLEDB to connect to it with SQL Native Client. Like, we pick the best provider for you. We'll also filter out the ones I don't have installed. So for example, I don't have SAP or Teradata providers on my machine. So when I have that box checked, it just filters them all out. So if I went through this, it would actually bring up a connection manager. I could configure the dialog. At the end, I'd have a new source configured with a connection manager and everything I'm ready to start using. Again, not really that useful for existing users or pro users like yourself, but great for new users who are just getting started, at least according to our usability tests. Package format changes. Has anybody actually tried to read the package XML, the DTSX? Yeah, I see lots of nodding. OK. Nice and simple, right? It is now. So we actually reformat our package. It's pretty printed. We've simplified it greatly, got rid of a lot of the extra stuff. We only persist default values now, too. And it's greatly simplified. We've done away with lineage IDs, like I said. IDs are actually persisted, like they look like this now. They're text format. So in theory, if somebody makes changes to do different packages, you could merge the data flows just by using the IDs. It makes packages diffable. It makes it easier to work with them in source control, and it really improves the multi-developer experience. Last thing I wanted to show was the new data quality transform. Did anybody go to the data quality session on Monday? So a couple people. So data quality services, a brand new product in SQL Server. Definitely recommend checking out the recording of that session from Monday. So basically, it lets you create a knowledge base, and you set up domains, and you teach it different rules for data cleansing. And they have a visual client that you can do the mapping in or make it learn rules and do cleansing. They also have a data flow component, the DQS cleansing component. So here I've set up a really simple domain. I have a location name and a zip code. And my domain is smart enough to know that I have a list of locations. They know what zip codes they are in, so they're going to validate the two, right? And tell me which ones are invalid, fix typos, do that sort of correction. Very easy component to use in SSIS. You just set up the mappings. You pick your available columns. You map them to specific domains. You can configure what the names are going to be. There's a bunch of advanced options, too, if you want to output how confidence, like the confidence level, the reason it was corrected, and stuff like that. So I'll run that, and I'll show off the new data viewers at the same time. So this is just going to read my location data, going to go through the data quality cleansing, data quality services cleansing, and then a conditional split. I'm going to split the rows based on the results. So here's my data viewer. Did you know that you could resize, that you can change the font size in data viewers? I've been working with the product 5 years, and I just found this out on Monday. I blogged about it, so at least I'm sharing with the community. But anyways, so here, so I'm going to sort by record status. So you see here we've corrected KFC. So I manually set up a rule within my domain. I don't want it to be called KFC. I want it to be fully spelled out Kentucky Fried Chicken. Same thing, Five Guys burgers and fries. I want it to be replaced with an ampersand. So these are some rules that I set up. I also set up a rule saying that postal code can only be 5 characters long or 5 numbers long. So it's flagged that this one's invalid. If I wanted to, I could set up a cleansing rule too that actually says strip off the rest or put it in a different column or something like that. Okay? Let that play. Finish, and then, yeah, it filtered out based on the record status after that. Okay, package number 4. Parameters. Okay, so there's only a few people who played around with Denali. Some of the big changes that we've made were simplifying the configuration model and simplifying the deployment model, like I said. This is where parameters come in. So parameters are a replacement for configurations. With the parameter model, it's basically providing an explicit configuration. It's kind of like a parameter on a C# function, right? It lets the package say, I need these things to run. You need to give me a batch ID, you need to give me a start date, or you need to give me a file location or something like that. And those parameters are exposed to either the calling package, so the execute package task, or through or the SQL agent, right? So who's ever running the package knows exactly what those parameters need, what that package needs to run. No more, parent package variables, and you're not sure what variables you need to create in the parent, and right? It makes the contract more explicit and a lot easier to manage. There's this new parameters tab up here. It shows the parameters. Parameters are essentially read-only variables. They're treated exactly like variables in a special namespace. If any UI, like expression UI or something that asks for parameters or lists your parameters, lists variables, the parameters are going to show up there as well. So here's a set of parameters that I've defined. Parameters can have some special properties. They can have descriptions. Make it easier for the DBA who's ever running it to, the developer can provide a description on the parameter to say what it's used for. We also have these 2 fields, sensitive and required. Sensitive is pretty self-explanatory, right? If you flag a parameter as sensitive, it's going to be masked in the UI. It means it's not going to show up in any logs. It's going to be treated in a sensitive way, protected way. Required means that I'm going to provide it a value at design time because I need a value at design time to be able to validate and work with. But you need to give me a new value at runtime. Never use this design time value at runtime. Okay? So if the execute package task calling the package or a SQL agent calling the package doesn't provide a value, it won't automatically just use whatever's in the package. Right? So common scenario here, I have a special batch ID where I have a test server right in my package. We deploy to production. We forget to update the configuration. Package runs for a week. And you've just been updating all that data into your test server. Right? Really common thing. That sort of thing can't happen anymore if you flag the parameter as required. Okay. So like I said, they're exposed to execute package task, the SQL agent. We have 2 levels of variables. We have the package level variables. We also have project level variables. Project level parameter is like a global variable, global parameter. It's visible to all packages within your solution, within your project. And you can set the value in one place, and it'll just be used everywhere. Okay. To make using parameters easier, or start using parameters easier, we've added this new parameterize functionality. So this is on variables, on connection managers, on tasks. So I can click the task and do parameterize. And that's going to bring up this UI, and I can select the property from the task that I want to add a parameter for. And that will automatically add an expression so that it gets applied and expose it at either give it a default value, expose it as either package level or project level, or I can select to use an existing parameter as well. And so instead of having to open up the expression UI and actually add the value in, this handles it for you automatically. Okay, so that's parameters. Make sense? Yeah. Next up, we have projects. Now, the concept of projects has always been there, right? You've always had a project in Visual Studio. But once you deploy your data integration solution, the concept of the project goes away. It's just a bunch of packages, right? And they can be anywhere. Execute package task uses a connection manager to find its child package. It can be on a remote server, it can be in a different directory, it can be anywhere. And one of the difficulties with deployment is when you move from one environment to another, maintaining all of those references, right? You have to update the connection manager, update the strings, you have to start parameterizing and storing values. It's a bit painful. Projects extends the concept of the Visual Studio project down to the runtime. Now you can compile your solution within Visual Studio. It goes down to a single file, a .ispack, that has everything you need to actually run. That becomes your deployable unit. You can use our deployment wizard to push it up to a server. You can actually run, with DTExec, you can run that file directly. The nice thing about that, though, is now when the execute package task tries to find its child package, it knows where to look. It's always going to be within the project. Right? So you notice here I have 3 execute package tasks here and 0 connection managers. Okay. On my connection manager page here, I have this new reference type, project reference. This means when it's a project reference, it is just going to find a package within the project to use and run. I can still use connection managers, called an external reference. At that point, it's no longer managed, so I can still point out to remote systems if I want. But using the project reference makes the whole deployment model a lot easier. The last concept I want to talk about is the entry point packages. So different packages can be flagged as entry point packages. This is very useful in large solutions where you have a lot of parent-child relationships. Really common in data warehousing solutions where you'll have 500 packages, but only 1 or 2 packages that are actually meant to be run directly. So those would be your entry point packages. When you flag them that way, there's UIs on the server that lets the DBA filter out all unrelated parameters. They only want to know about the parameters they actually have to set, because those are the packages that are being run directly. All right, so it simplifies that process too. It's another way for the ETL developer to let the person know who's deploying and actually running the packages, let them know what things should be run. Last thing is about a new wizard type that we have. We have a project import wizard. It basically lets you select an ISPack, or lets you point to an SSIS server and download an existing project, and it'll turn it into a Visual Studio project for you. All right, so in case you don't have the DT proj anywhere, it just automatically imports it and creates it for you. Make sense? Any other quick questions before we move on? Yep.
Parameters, are they saved to a file?
So the question was, are parameters saved to a file? So the project level parameters are saved to a separate file. Parameters themselves are saved within the package. When we talk about the server and how the configuration is done there, I will show that. Yeah. Anything else before I move on? Question back? So the question is, so we have 250 to 300 packages. Any recommendations on how to centralize the configuration? Yes, Denali is all about centralizing configuration. We'll take a look at that too when we talk about the server. Okay, so let me switch over to the presentation. That's not the right mouse. So quick summary of what we went over. Visual Studio 2010 support, .NET 4, undo, redo. Talked about the new toolbox, the new UI layout. Quickly went over projects and parameters, and we'll talk a bit more about that in the next section. And finally, I talked about the new metadata improvements for flexible order of authoring. The reason why we call it flexible order of authoring, or FUA, as I like to call it, is you can actually build your package backwards. Right? The components remember their metadata. You could start with a destination and add stuff, and you could actually build your package backwards. That was the whole point of the exercise. OK, the new project deployment model. Again, we're going to talk about the SSIS server, new feature in Denali. And we'll talk about this new project deployment model. First thing I want to point out is that everything you have now continues to work in Denali. You can take advantage of these new Denali features, but your existing stuff will work as well. You will go through an upgrade process. It should be pretty painless. It should be pretty seamless. Custom components will continue to work. So R2 and 2008 custom components should continue to work in Denali. You might want to recompile them at some point for the new assemblies, but everything you have now should continue to work. If you want to continue using file system deployments, that's up to you. Everything continues to work except, there's always an except. DTS has been removed from Denali. I know it makes a lot of people sad, but we finally removed it from the product. And ActiveX script tasks support as well has been removed. These are two things that we deprecated in 2005, have now been removed from Denali. Like I said, moving to the project deployment model is optional, although from what we've seen, most ETL projects will benefit from it. Main benefits from the new model, as we'll see, is easier deployment, easier configuration, and better logging. But a lot of people out there have already built up their own deployment, configuration, and logging frameworks. A lot of investment in that. If you have a solution that is working for you, you want to continue using that solution. You can take advantage of the new designer improvements. You don't have to use this model. All the stuff I just showed in the designer also works if you're using the current deployment model. But like I said, from what I've seen, new projects that you're developing, you might want to try targeting this new model because it works pretty well. Things you need to know for preparing for the deployment module. First up, you are creating everything is bundled together as a single deployable unit, right? So are all your packages in the same place? Do you have packages on a file system in different locations? Do you have it in SQL Server? Are they all in the same Visual Studio project already? That makes it very easy. Do you have multiple projects in the same Visual Studio project? I was working with one customer that had 800 packages in a single Visual Studio project for some reason. It was like 20 different ETL solutions, but they found it was easier for some reason in one Visual Studio project. You want to break that up, and so have one Visual Studio project per data integration project that you're doing. Parameters. You want to take a look at what configurations you're using. So there's the configurations that your packages know about, and there's also runtime configurations, right? So packages on the command line, you do /set or /config, right? External configurations that you might be using. You want to keep track of those, find out where they are. Also figure out whether configurations are shared between packages. So if you're using the same package and same configuration across packages, you might want to make that into a global configuration or a project level parameter. This I haven't talked about yet, and I'll show in the next demo. Shared connection managers. So we actually have project level connection managers as well. So you have two options here. When you're doing this, you can either just keep the connection string as a configuration like you would, or connection string as a global parameter, or you can actually have a global connection manager object. That means you can do some very interesting stuff. Somebody was talking about lookup improvements before. One of the most interesting things you can do, partly because I coded it myself, is that with a cache connection manager, right? The whole point of a cache connection manager for lookup is it reads the cache once and you can share it between packages. Now you can read the cache once and share it between all of your packages in your project. So in a large data warehouse solution, you load the cache once, and now you have a shared cache that's only read into memory once and shared across 50 packages, however many packages that you're running. Finally, if you're using this model, you're most likely going to be running the package on the server. In a lot of cases, you have a choice, right? Whether you want to expose everything you need as a parameter, so everything's centrally managed on a single server. Another common pattern is you have an execute SQL task that goes out to a server and retrieves state. We'll download what package you want to run, what directory, and stuff like that. Seen a lot of custom configuration that way. You can still continue to do that, but one of the goals, and one of the things we've heard from our DBAs, is they want, when they are dealing with a data integration solution, they want everything together, so they know where everything is, and they can easily move it from one environment to another. So you have to keep track of whether there's any state stored in external databases. We provide a wizard. We really like wizards at Microsoft, especially our team. So we provide this new wizard. It is not called the migration wizard because we severely scarred our users with the DTS migration wizard. It's completely different from a migration wizard. It's called the project conversion wizard. Except in the next CTP where it's still called the migration wizard. We got some feedback saying that they didn't like that term, so we've renamed it in the future. But for this CTP, this demo, it's called the migration wizard, unfortunately. This will help you go through. We've continued to improve the wizard, make it easy as possible. What I'd like to see, and what I currently have in the current builds, is you can take a fairly complex data warehousing project, click, click, click your way through, and have it convert all your execute package tasks to use references, and convert all of your configurations to the appropriate kind of parameter, whether project level or package level, and have everything working at the end. Okay. So that's the goal. And for some projects, you will need to open it up and refine it later on in bids. We can't automatically convert things with expressions, for example. So if you're using an expression to figure out what kind of package, or you're dynamically updating the location of your package that you're running, that sort of thing, you'll need to code the logic in yourself. You can also consider using shared connection managers. The wizard doesn't automatically convert things to shared connection managers. But thankfully, it's very easy to do that, and I'll show that in my next demo. Let's go over the conversion wizard real fast. Close all this, and we'll take a look at my project here. Now, when you first open up a project from 2005 to 2008, it will be upgraded to Denali. In the next CTP, it says legacy deployment model. It is not meant to be legacy. This just means file deployment model. We've actually renamed this. This was more of a translation error with our Shanghai team. File deployments, not deprecated, not legacy. Everything's meant to continue working. Like I said, if you prefer to use the file deployment mode, you can do that. New Denali projects will default to using the project deployment model by default. Or you can convert it back to the file deployment model as well. So here I have a package. So here I have a solution. I'll open my master package. It runs a couple child packages. So here it will run a set of dimension table loads. This is a for each loop. It's going to loop over a directory and load a bunch of different customer data. It's going to invoke this customer package every single time. And then it has an expression. So it's going to dynamically run some package at runtime. So I have a execute SQL task. It's going to go query a table, bring me back a whole bunch of variable values. So what directory I'm going to read, the batch ID to use, whether or not to run my refresh package. And then it's going to do stuff from there. And I have all my other packages that I need within my solution. To convert, I right-click and say Convert to Project Deployment Model. It's going to bring up our handy wizard. I can select my packages, enter any passwords if I have to. I can name my package. I can also set my protection level at the project level. Right? So this is going to be one protection level across all packages within my solution. And as I'll talk about during deployment, you should never get a cannot decrypt package or password node error ever again. I'll tell you why in a bit. So here it has gone through and has actually found all my execute package tasks, and it has mapped it by name. It knows which child package I want to call. This one I know I'm actually calling dynamically, so I'm just going to uncheck it because I'm going to manually do that one afterwards. Here is gone through every package and found all my configurations. So it has found parent variable configurations that I'm using. It has also found a shared configuration file that they all use, and it's going to config. If I have any runtime configurations that I apply with SQL Agent or apply directly on the command line, I can enter those in here as well. Click Next. It's actually going to convert all of those configurations to parameters. And I have a choice of making them either a package level or project level. We're actually a lot smarter than this in recent builds. We detect if a certain configuration is shared. We'll automatically turn that into a project level parameter if we detect that it is. So my destination is actually going to be shared for all of my, so that's the destination connection string, shared between all my packages. So I want to make that project level. Now I have the option to actually configure my parameter values. I can flag them as required or not, enter descriptions for them. And then it's going to tell me everything it's going to do to actually perform this migration. I click Migrate. It's going to, click Convert in the new wizard, and it's going to go through it. I'll just cancel out and show the pre-upgraded package so I don't break my demo. This is what it looks like after doing my upgrade. If I take a look at my master package, my connection managers so we're now using project references instead of those connection managers. We don't automatically remove those connection managers because we can't be sure that they're not used by anything else. So we leave those in. You can just quickly delete those. And then I need to, so this was the package that's updated dynamically, right? I can set an expression on this now. Oops. I can set an expression on this now to set the package name to one of my variables, to my refresh package variable. So I can still dynamically change the child target, right, of my execute package task. So I can still do everything I used to be able to do. Within the execute package task UI, I have this new parameter binding thing, and I can set up, map my child package parameters to variables in my parent package. And this is actually, in the recent builds, this is actually done automatically as well. This will be automatically done by the wizard for you. So this is going to be the customer source file. So I can do the mapping like that. If I have a case where I am dynamically running different packages, and they each take different parameters, you can actually map every single parameter there. You can map the superset of parameters. At runtime, the package is going to look for the ones it needs and just ignore the rest. So you can still basically do everything that you do today and continue doing with this new model as well. So I mentioned that when I went through the wizard, I created a project level parameter for my connection string. The alternative to doing that way is to use shared connection managers. So let me look here. So within the project, I have this new shared connection manager. That's going to be stored as a separate file, just an XML file that can be diffed and viewed and everything. I'm configuring it just like any other connection manager. And the way this shows up in the child package is it shows up bolded down here. Okay, I could create, I'll show you the creation. Creating connection managers, project level connection managers is really simple. If I have a local connection manager, I can say convert to project connection, and it just automatically puts it into a global scope, and then it can be used from there. I can also demote it, to convert to package connection. Now it's demoted back locally, so I can always move up, move down, make use of these things, all shared. Like I said, those connection managers share state across all child packages, so it enables some pretty interesting scenarios. Does that take the place of data sources? Yes, it does, actually. We've actually removed data sources from the latest thing. So in 2005, 2008, you could create these data source files, right, the .ds files. And that meant you could change it in one place and it would update your packages. The problem is that that was a runtime only thing, or sorry, a design time only thing. You lost that at runtime. You didn't have that central configuration at runtime. So to actually make the package update, you actually had to open it in the designer. So it wasn't the ideal solution. Shared connection managers are the better way to do that. So they've actually taken the place of those .ds files completely. Okay, so now my project is ready. I'm going to compile it. I'm going to do a build. It's going to compile down. Let me just open the folder. Here I named my project ETL project, so it's a .is pack file, and that's going to contain everything I need for the project to work. I also noticed I have all of the .dtsx files as well, in case I want to just deploy them individually. I'm still using the file deployment mode. I can double-click that, or I can deploy directly from bids. I'm going to do a deploy. This brings up our deployment wizard, because we needed another wizard. And I'm going to deploy it to my server. So I could browse for different servers on my network. And I can browse the server as well. I can create folders, manage, basically like the SSIS server is today, or sorry, the SSIS service or MSDB is managed today. I have different folders warning me that I've already deployed. That's OK. I'm just going to deploy it up. That's pretty quick. Notice this changing protection level item. So this is what I meant by you won't see those cannot decrypt password errors anymore. So what we do is we actually automatically convert the project to server storage, which means the passwords are in the clear, and we encrypt the tables in the database you're deploying to. So all your parameter values are encrypted automatically. All your packages are encrypted automatically as well. So it makes the management of secure data a lot easier as well within SSIS. OK, so once it's deployed, I can go over to Management Studio. And I'll just refresh here. I have my integration services node under Management Studio. Whoops. See here. And I'll drill down. I deployed to the sales system. I drill down to my project, and that's the project that I just deployed. I'll go into a further demo in just a bit. Let me switch back to my slides. So what we saw the project conversion wizard. Its main purpose is to convert your package tasks, execute package tasks, and convert configurations to parameters. I talked about shared connection managers and how you can make use of them. And I quickly showed the deployment wizard. Does all that stuff make sense as well? So when you're deploying to this new server model. I'll just talk about this real quick. One thing to point out first, actually, is that the SSIS server is not a standalone server. It's not yet another instance you need to manage. It's actually just a relational app. It's a SQL app. It's a user database on your local SQL server that you manage through SSMS. So it's not another service, not another license or anything like that. It's very, very, very simple. But the goals for the server were to make configuration easier. Right? So from the server, you can centrally manage all your parameter values. You know where your values are coming from. You can centrally manage your connection managers as well. Connection managers are automatically exposed on the server, so you don't need to explicitly create parameters for each one. There's also some advanced property override functionality. This was added, so who here has ever used the /set functionality in DTExec to override properties on the command line? Okay, so good amount. That's to get rid of that. So the scenario here is a developer creates an ETL project. He deploys it up to the server. He forgets to parameterize or add a configuration for one parameter. You don't want to go through the sign-off process of rebuilding a new solution and redeploying the new solution. This lets you easily override that property value with an arbitrary path. You can just push a value into the package to be used at runtime. So it sort of gets around having to redeploy your entire project model. Really more of an advanced functionality, but we've heard from especially people in lockdown environments where it takes 3 weeks to get a sign-off for new deployment. It becomes very handy making configuration changes like that. Security. I had mentioned we do transparent encryption of projects and parameter values on the server. We also have row-level security to control access at the catalog level, so at the server level, basically. At the folder level, you can actually secure things down to the project level as well. And management. All the management of your packages is done through SSMS. There's also a full API, kind of like SMO. You can manage everything on the server, either through SMO or even through PowerShell as well. You can do deployments and everything through PowerShell. And you can run packages interactively. Now when you right-click and do run package, it doesn't run it locally like it does today. It will run it on the server using your credentials. You can also schedule things and run packages through SQL Agent as well. We also have a lot of built-in logging and reporting, which I'm going to talk about a lot in our last section. Back to the demo. So here I have SSMS. If I drill down more here, I have my solution at the project level. I can see its properties, but what I wanted to show was versions. So I can actually manage multiple versions. Every time I deploy, we actually keep previous versions. So it's sort of like a poor man's source control, if you will. You can actually roll back to previous versions. Not something you always want to do because it doesn't always match the schema changes, but it's at least an option. If there's a bad deployment, if you make a mistake, you can always roll back. Lots of DBAs had asked us for that. I can also configure my projects. So if I go to configure, I can set my default values for each of these parameters on this server. I can also filter it down to entry point packages. In my case, I only had that one master package, which didn't have any parameters, but it did have some connection managers. So I can see the connection managers, and I can set some default values for it if I wanted to. Or I can also set default values for each of my, so at the project level or at each of the child packages directly. References have to do with environments, and I'll get back to that in just a bit. I can validate. I can move. So I can move projects between servers. Environments are a collection of variables or a collection of settings that you can define on the server. And when you run your package, you can select which environment you're going to run in. So say you had a central ETL server that processes data from multiple customers, and each customer needs a different connection string because you're connecting to a different database. Right? I could create two different environments here. Customer A, customer A, and I define a variable in here called data source, and I give it, which is the name of the server I want to connect to, set to localhost. And I can define the same thing in customer B. And when I configure my master package here, connection manager, I configure the server name, I can set it to an environment variable. So I set it to data source. Okay. Notice it shows up underlined, meaning it's using something from the environment. Now when I go to run this package, I can select which environment it's going to run in, and it will automatically pull that value in from the environment. Very useful in some scenarios, not something everybody will use, but some neat functionality there. Like I said, so when you're running a package, I can set parameter values. I can change connection manager values. If I do it on the run dialog, it is going to change it for that execution only. All the parameter values you set get logged, so you can look at the logs afterwards, look at the reports, be very clear about what exactly was passed in for every parameter. I'll just run this here. After running the package, it asks me if I want to open our new dashboard. I do. So here's going to open up my reporting services report. I see that my package failed for some reason. I can see all the sub packages that it actually ran, I see the different statuses. I can drill down to see specific messages. I can see performance. I can also see performance over time. And I'll go into detail more about that in the next section. But to me, this is one of the big advantages of the server. So another one of the stumbling blocks that people hit is all about logging with SSIS, right? You run the package in bids, you have a nice debug output. You see everything that's happening. You run it from the command line with dtexec, you have a nice debug output. You see all the events. Run it with SQL agent, you don't get anything. You have no messages. Now by default, when you run packages on the server, it will log all this information. And when I run a package, I can actually select my logging level. Right? So I can turn off logging, which is more for performance reasons. Basic, which gives you the errors and the warnings. Performance, which means detailed trace information. I'll go into what exactly we capture there. And verbose, which is more for diagnostics and full debugging. In the next CTV, we don't have this, but in the final release, we will. You can actually change the default logging level for the entire server. So you don't have to go in and modify any executions or anything like that. You just set it once, and it enables it. I believe you can also set it at the project level, but that one I'm not sure about. So again, changing a configuration in one place, and it applies to all your packages. You don't actually have to go in and add loggers. If you currently have loggers or you have your own custom logging, that all still works as well. You can still redirect logs to SQL Server or any XML file if you want, but the server also captures everything you need by default. I can quickly show SQL agent. Yeah, question? Yeah. So the there's an option here for 32-bit runtime. That was actually added to the SQL agent UI as well in 2008. It's not there in 2005. But what this means is you can actually control whether you want the dtexec process to run 64-bit, which is default because that's a 64-bit machine, or in 32-bit mode. So you'd run in 32-bit mode if you had 32-bit only drivers, right? I'm sure you've hit those issues before. Use that from command line. So from the command line, you can actually just pick which version of dtexec you want to run. So there's two. So when you do an install, there's actually two versions of dtexec installed. One under program files x86, one under program files. If you select the right one, that will determine what runtime you're using. Yeah, comment was about it will default to 64-bit. That will depend on how your paths is set up. Usually it's 64-bit first. Right, you can't do this from the command line. Yeah, we could talk about that, why it works like that after. No, this is basically like the SQL agent switch. One more question before I move on. I believe you can control, that's a good question. So the question is, can I set that at the package level or the project level? I know you can definitely do it for specific executions, right? So that was for that run of it. I believe you can set the default as well. If we go to configure. No, that's not there right now. I think there might be a server property too. I'd have to look into it. I think there's a server property that you can set to set the default for that entire project or for that entire server as well. If I look at so SQL agent, I'll create a new job for SSIS. Step, new step. We still have our integration services package step. If I select SSIS catalog, it looks a lot like my run page. So here I'm just going to select local. I can browse and select which package I want to run. Master package. The configuration page looks just like the configuration page I showed before. There's no parameters, but I can configure my connection manager. I have an error here because I haven't mapped to an environment. So now I've mapped to an environment and it's picked there. All right, so SQL agent UI works the same way. When you run interactively, it's going to use your credentials. When you run through SQL agent, it will use a SQL agent account or a proxy account if that's what you've set up. Okay, let me switch back to the slides for the last part of the demo. Actually, before I move on, is there any questions? Okay. Quick review. We took a look at SSMS and how you can use SSMS to manage your SSIS projects. We talked about running packages, specifying parameter values, you setting up property overrides. I didn't show the demo of that, but you basically, on that advanced tab, you put in a path to the value you want to set. We talked about setting up server environments and running packages within different server environments. And finally, we talked about scheduling packages deployed to the SSIS catalog using SQL agent. Question? So the question is, when you run in Visual Studio, does it run on the server and server credentials? No, when you run in Visual Studio, it's still in Visual Studio. It's still running local. We didn't fully integrate Visual Studio and the server in that way. We'd like feedback on that, whether that's something that people want to see. The initial feedback we got was, no, keep it separate. I might not be using the server. I might be still going to the file system and everything like that. But that's some interesting feedback we can talk about later. So one more question. Question is, can I have multiple instances of integration services on the same server? You have one instance you have one SQL server, one SSIS catalog per SQL Server instance. Yeah, so if you have multiple instances, you can have SSIS. You can have SSIS running on its own instance if you want. And yeah, I didn't go into detail, but the execution model for the package when you actually run, it doesn't run in process with the server. It actually runs out of process. So it won't take down your SQL instance or anything like that. The SSIS server, in essence, is just a set of stored procedures, a set of CLR stored procedures to actually control and coordinate the execution. But there's a new process you'll see pop up called IS server exec that actually it's like DT exec that takes care of the server processing. Last question. The question is does SSIS run as part of the SQL engine like DTS? No, it does not run in process with the SQL engine. So it's actually running, it's still SSIS. The runtime works the same way as it used to. It's now just coordinated by a server process. So I don't have that separate SQL service running? No, you won't. No, you won't have a separate service for SSIS to manage it. I knew that was going to come up. Is SSIS cluster aware? Well, it is a user database. We can install on a cluster. From what I've done, we've tested and it seems to work on a cluster. I can't say that we are cluster aware because I don't know if we've actually gone through the sign-off process and actually done it. But it's worthwhile testing it out in the CTP and see if it works in your cluster. You can let us know if that works, and I can update my talk. So one of the big advantages of moving to the server, to this new server model, is this new logging and debugging and functionality that is all built in for you. We've also put a lot of work into improving error messages. You hopefully won't see error has occurred on column without telling you what the error was or what the column was. So we've gone through and fixed a lot of those. We capture a lot more information. For example, on loops, right, we actually keep track of which iteration of the loop it was on and the values that were used on that iteration of the loop. So we log a lot more data. And like I said, we have a lot of built-in reports. So within SSMS, you have a dashboard that will show you how many packages have run today, how many have failed, how many have succeeded, what is my total usage, how long did this package take to run in the past month. Show you all the different executions, all the different messages. All the data within these reports are exposed as stored procedures and views, so you can write your own reports on them as well. And MVP Jamie Thompson, well known in the SQL Server community, he's already created his own report pack up on CodePlex. You can download and integrate into your own reporting system. Lots of detailed information in there. I'll talk about the different things that we capture on the next couple of slides. So the things we wanted to address were performance issues, right? These are common questions. We actually dealt with a customer service case the other day. They had a package that has been running fine for the past 6 months. It usually takes an hour. They called CSS because their execution from last night has taken 7 hours, and it's still running, and it's on a production machine. And so CSS asked, OK, well, open up your logs and tell me where it's stopped at. And they said, what logs? OK. When it finishes running, go back into the package, add a SQL logger, output to this, capture these events. OK. Package took 16 hours to run. When it's finally done, they do that. They run it again. 16 hours later, they send the logs to CSS. CSS calls them back and says, OK, you didn't enable the right events. Please enable these events here. Anyways, it took 4 days to resolve the issue. That shouldn't happen anymore. Now it's just a switch. By default, it will capture these things. You can find out how much time was spent at each execution phase, within each task, within each component. We even capture all perf counter information as well, and not global perf counter information for that specific package execution. So I talked about component timing. So that's built into our reports. You can also just query. There's example queries in here to actually pull out, how long did this component spend at each of these time phases. Give me a breakdown of my total time overall for every component run on the server. And I said there's it's kind of like a DMV, DM execution perf counter. You can actually just query it, and you can find out how much memory was available in the system when this package ran. How much memory did this package use? How many buffers were spooled to disk? All the stuff that the regular SSIS perf counters capture. Data issues. This is a pretty cool feature, I have to admit. So it happens a lot. An issue occurs in production. ETL developer says, I can't reproduce. It works fine for me. It turns out it's a data issue, but the ETL developer doesn't have access to the data, can't access it directly. We've added this new feature called a data tap. And what a data tap is, it lets you, without updating the package, so using straight SQL, you say, at this path, I want to capture all the data coming through, output it to a text file so I can review it afterwards. Okay. So again, this is without having to modify your package, without having to redeploy. It's just straight SQL statements. We'll release a set of snippets that make it really easy to actually do. You find your path, you output the file, and then the ETL developer can take it and debug with it or run through it. We actually used this the other day with a Microsoft internal project. Where a package was failing because a derived column component turned out his expression wasn't handling nulls correctly. So yeah, we were quickly able to take the data, run it through, and figure out what was actually causing the problem. So the question was, is there any way to stop that? Well, so any way to stop that if you don't want to well, you don't have to create a data tap, right? So it's completely optional. The DBA or the sysadmin, whoever owns that SQL instance, or the SSIS instance, I should say, can create the data taps. That's not something that's created at design time. That's only done on the server using SQL. Okay. Sorry, this question, what? The output? So we dump it out into CSV that can then be easily imported. We don't use raw file because we figure you actually want to be able to look at the data. So there's a question here. Oh, yeah, yes. Yeah, so like I said, there's road level security, so you can secure access that way. There's also very high, well, you basically need admin privileges to be able to create a data tab. Yeah, so it should be a secure feature. Other nice thing is you can find out how many rows passed on every path in your package. So you can dynamically write a query that will tell you, you don't need to insert row counts and log those row counts anymore. That data is just all there, right, for every single path within your package. You can just query that out. Very handy feature. This is just a quick thing for review afterwards. I mean, the idea was to give DBAs more information about their packages, right? From a very high level, like, what's the current status? Is it running? Is it failed? How long has it been running? To exactly where is it running on? Is it hung? And not only for current executions, but historical as well. Right? We try to keep, well, because everything is logged, you can easily query, find out how many rows did this package transfer the last time I ran it, a week ago. How long did it take? We have a graph that shows performance over time. As my data increases, is my package scaling linearly? Am I going to run out of my batch window? Everything like that. Last feature I want to talk about is the memory dumps. So we added dumping functionality in 2008. It's now on the server as well. So there's an option on the advanced tab to say, okay, anytime an error occurs, create a memory dump. That's going to create a memory dump and a text file that you can send to CSS for very easy debugging of your problems. You can also set it to dump on specific issues, specific errors as well. So that we've used that very frequently in 2008 to get to the root cause of a lot of tough problems. Quick summary of what I went over today. 2 pillars to the Denali release. We talked about enhancing our usability both for new developers and existing developers. I took a look at the new improved configuration, deployment, and management story. Here's some more resources. Please fill out the evaluation. We pay close attention to these things. If you didn't like what I said, didn't like my presentation, if you liked it, please fill out the eval. And here's a quick thing. And now we have 5 minutes for questions.